Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors, and if you are new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community, and without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. The first one is titled, "Neighbor parked his stolen sports car in my driveway, I got him towed and arrested." About 3 years ago, my mother passed away. It was absolutely devastating, and I can tell just how much it hurt my dad. He was all alone in this big house that him and my mother built their lives on. He became depressed, and my sister and I quickly became worried about him. After a year, my sister and I invited my dad to come live with one of us so that he was not as lonely. Both of us lived in the next city over, so we were not at all far from my dad, but we thought that maybe dad would feel better if he had someone to live with rather than live alone. However, my dad declined. He did not say it directly, but essentially, he still wanted to be able to maintain his independence. He was in his late 60s, and although he had arthritis, he was fine for the most part. So, we compromised and got my dad a nice little house in the same city as us. The house we used to live in with my mom, and the house my sister and I grew up in, went up for sale, and a distant relative actually bought it, so it stayed within the family. My dad moved into his new house, and he had a 2016 Aveo car. And by the way guys, please correct me if I'm wrong, Aveos are from Chevrolet, but I could be wrong. Anyway, now my dad is pretty much a homebody. He likes being in the comfort of his own home and personalized space. And because he was in the downtown area of the city, now he could walk to places around him, so his car would not move for weeks at a time. His next door neighbors, a young couple in their 20s, had taken advantage of this and had made a deal with my dad to park one of their cars in his driveway. This couple had 3 cars, but only 2 could fit in their driveway. My dad was a pretty mellow guy, so he had let them. They parked behind his car, which I thought was pretty inconvenient. However, my dad said that the few times he wanted to take his car out for the day, he just went next door and asked them to move their car, and they were always very polite about it and moved it right away. Credit given to my father, because I probably would not want my neighbor's car in my driveway, but it worked out for them. Until one day, when my dad had wanted to drive to the other side of town and get lunch at this little cafe him and my mom used to go to. He had gone over to the neighbor's house to ask them to move the car. The wife that usually drove the car was nowhere to be found, and the husband said that she was out with their other car and that she had the keys for the car sitting in my dad's driveway. He said he would call her to come move the real car quickly. Now, this is where I have a problem. The guy seemed nice and all, but the car did not move for another 4 hours. By then, it was too dark for my dad to drive comfortably, as he has some vision problems. Like, it was pretty inconsiderate, honestly. My dad was nice enough to let these people park in his driveway, and they were starting to be douchebags about it. Well, anyway, a couple of days later, my dad called me up wanting to know if I wanted to pick him up and go to the car show. It was like one of those parking lot meetups with old cars. My dad loved cars, and I was just happy my dad was wanting to get out of the house for once, so of course I said yes. However, there was a problem when I arrived at his house. My dad wanted to take his car, but the neighbor's car was blocking it. He had told me that he went over and asked the neighbor to move it when he called me that morning, which was about 2 hours prior to me showing up at my dad's house. I had said no problem, that I would take care of it, got on my phone and called a tow truck to come get this a-hole's car. I was very protective over my dad since my mom passed away. It seems that he was lonely and lacking something in his life, and I think sometimes people could probably tell and took advantage of him. Well, not on my watch. The tow truck arrived shortly after, and everything was going well because the next door neighbors were not coming out to see what all the noise was about. Well, until the tow truck driver was getting ready to drive off. Both the guy and his wife come running out, yelling at my dad and asking him, "What the F do you think you're doing?" I calmly explained to them that they would not be allowed to park in my dad's driveway anymore, as they were taking advantage of him, and I would not stand for it. The guy then starts going on this long rant about how he doesn't have proper documentation for the car and he did not know how he was going to get it back. He started begging the tow truck driver to take the car off, but the driver told him that once the car was on the truck, he legally had to take it to the tow yard. The guy was pissed. Well, come to find out that he never got his little sports car back because apparently it was stolen to begin with. I found out through one of my dad's neighbors that the husband had been arrested because the car had been reported stolen and the police linked it back to this guy. The girlfriend claimed she had no idea that her husband just showed up to the house one day saying he bought a car. I started to wonder if that is why they wanted to park the car in my dad's driveway in the first place. If the police had found it there, my dad would have been responsible since it was on his property. Regardless, the husband went to jail for carjacking and the wife moved out of the house shortly after. Luckily, they were just renting the house, so they moved out pretty fast and my dad was able to move in and out of his driveway whenever he wanted. Oh, and by the way, my sister moved in next door to him. They frequently have lunch dates and we all get together on the weekends to have breakfast at a cafe that my mom used to love. And yeah, Ripe Stars, talk about entitlement. Not only was it enough for these neighbors to park their own damn car in OP's driveway, but it even was a stolen one. How entitled do you have to be? If your neighbor parked a stolen car in your own driveway, what would you have done? Please let us know in the comments. And by the way, if you have watched until here and enjoy the stories about awful neighbors, then please don't forget to post some star emojis in the comments if you want to support my channel. Thank you so much in advance. Your help is very much appreciated. And the next one was posted by user Manga Guitar 96 and it is titled The Pink Elephant with Purple Polka Dots. This story was from a long time ago, around the 50s or early 60s. It's an old childhood story, that of my dad's, and it is centered around my late grandma. When my father was in his teens, they had a neighbor who was a drunk. The dude had a tendency to get real nasty according to dad, and my grandmother hated drunks since my grandpa had a drinking habit. During this time period, I don't entirely think things like drunk driving or DUI existed, so no one gave a damn. The neighbor had a bit of a nasty habit of constantly parking in areas he shouldn't be. No matter how many times my grandma tried to reason with him, he would not listen. Well, one day he crossed the line when he parked his car right behind my uncle's car and could not let him out of where he was parked. She tried talking to him, but no dice. That was the final straw for Grandma. Now, before I get into the revenge, here's some things everyone needs to know about dear old Grandma. She sadly passed away when I was 7, so I did not have the chance to get to know her very well. I asked my dad about her a few times, and here's the best way to sum up my grandma. While she was the type of woman who could bake cookies and create lovely art and make her children and grandchildren gorgeous clothing, she was also a woman who literally burned her bra years ago. She was a complete smartass who, if you wronged her or her family, you would face her wrath. No one would dare mess with her, not even my grandpa or the neighbors. She was a woman ahead of her time. The revenge. Now, here is where the revenge comes in. My grandmother was so sick of this neighbor's shenanigans, she went to the nearest store and bought a ceramic elephant. Afterwards, she went to the hardware store, bought 2 gallons of paint, pink and purple, and began to paint the elephant. The result was a pink elephant with purple polka dots on the body. Now that the item was finished, every single night when the neighbor would go to the bar, she had my dad lug the elephant onto the front property, wait for him to come home from the bar, completely drunk out of his mind, and see the elephant. The neighbor would stare at it with curiosity and wonder how much he drank before going inside and passing out. The very next morning, possibly around 5 AM, my grandma would wake my dad up and force him to bring the elephant inside the house. Around 8 AM, the neighbor is up, looks out his window, and bam, the elephant was gone. This went on for months. They would pull this every night and day for those few months, and it soon got to a point the neighbor began to question his sanity. The other neighbors did not do anything since most did not know, thought the neighbor was crazy or new and did not want to get into the crosshairs. I'm not entirely sure what happened, but I think according to Dad, this led the neighbor to quit drinking entirely. As for the elephant, I think my grandpa sold it a year or two after grandma passed away, along with a few other things that belonged to her. And yeah, as seasoned veterans of Reddit, we of course all know you never mess with a grandma or grandpa. And the next one is another story by user Manga Guitar 96, and it is titled Who Sunk the Boat? This was a story that took place a long time ago, around the early 60s to be exact. This is a story from my dad's childhood. He was about 14 when this occurred, and this story follows both my grandparents. And for those wondering, my grandmother is the same grandma who messed with one of her neighbor's sanity by using a pink elephant with purple polka dots. Now, to explain how this story went, my dad grew up in a fishing village in New York, and the area was basically an inland peninsula to be exact. The street he lived on was pretty small and could only fit a number of cars down there, but there was a yacht club on that street which actually took up some room. Now, my late grandfather was a fisherman for sport. He would love going out on his boat or to the pier to catch some fish, since the ocean was right next to his house, but since the yacht club was there, he needed to dock his boat with a buoy next to it. Grandpa's boat was a small 16-feet fishing boat that he tied next to a buoy so the yacht club would not go near the boat and he had some room to dock. However, on a decent day with the tides, the buoy and boat would end up blocking all the boats from the yacht club from leaving the dock. It got to the point that one day the yacht club spoke to my grandpa and offered him free docking at the yacht club if he sunk the buoy. Since docking was not cheap at that club, my grandpa took the deal. Now here is where the story of revenge takes place. One of my father's neighbors was a member of the yacht club and was one of the nastiest people my dad ever met. They did not know why, but this man was just nasty to everyone around him, especially children. He was just someone who had a chip on their shoulder pretty much. One day, my dad and grandpa were going to go fishing together on my grandpa's boat, but when they went to the area where this boat was, they found it gone, and in its spot was the nasty neighbor's boat, a 32-feet boat. My dad was surprised when he saw this, but a part of him theorized grandpa did not tie his boat to its spot correctly since it was gone now. My grandpa, while disappointed, shrugged it off and told my dad, "What are you gonna do?" After that, they went home and told my grandma, who was furious and knew immediately what happened. Now, if you read the story Pink Elephant with Purple Polka Dots, you would know that while grandma was a sweet woman who was very crafty, she burned her bra years ago, and if you wronged her or her family, there would always be hell to pay. Now onto the revenge. After grandpa's boat disappeared, dad went to bed that night and around 3 AM heard a door open and someone leave the house. He thought his mind was playing tricks on him and went back to sleep. The next morning, my dad went outside and discovered the yacht club trying to pull out the neighbor's 32-foot boat out of the ocean. Someone snuck onto the boat in the middle of the night and removed the scuttle plugs from the boat. Now, for those who don't know what a scuttle plug is a type of plug that is used to drain excess water in a boat or sink it if you remove it while it is in the water. The only thing you could see of that neighbor's boat was the American flag popping up out of the water. The neighbor was furious because besides getting the boat out of the ocean, he had to strip the motor for the boat, which back then for a 32-foot boat was not an easy process, pumped the excess water out of it and tried to get it to float again. When my dad saw this, he knew immediately who was behind it and went back home to his mother, who was preparing breakfast for the family. Dad went right over to her and told her that if she kept the scuttle plugs, he would have made it into a bracelet for her. She then went ahead and innocently denied that she was behind it. As for grandpa, he managed to get his boat back fortunately after it was found in the local bay, but was denying also that he knew what happened to the neighbor's boat. And the next one was posted by user Original Crazy Dog Lady, and it is titled Very Entitled New Neighbors. This happened a very long time ago. The year was 1958 when my family moved into a small bayside neighborhood. We all lived among relatives and friends whom were very close-knit. As time went by, things changed as kids grew up, married and moved away. Even my own family moved away and back to the neighborhood throughout the 60s, 70s and 80s. This particular story happened during the 1980s after my dad had his heart attack, which caused him trouble with driving. A new neighbor moved in across the street from my husband, my 2 kids and myself, which was around the corner to my dad and mom's house. The home the entitled neighbors lived in was a newly built raised ranch, which seemed out of place among the older beach bungalows dating back as far as 1899. The newbies were brother and sister and claimed to be the owners of the dirt embankment that bordered the road edge. This was city property with a right-of-way to electric companies and plow crews during the winter months. My dad had difficulties backing up into the 1.5-lane road and would back up onto the right-of-way onto the edge that abutted the neighbor's property line that they claimed they owned. I came walking with my dogs down the road in front of my dad's house when I saw the brother dumping broken glass in the road section where my dad would back his car into to get out of his driveway. The driveway to the small bungalow my dad and mom lived in was very narrow and he needed the backup room. I confronted brother asking why he did that. The young man snapped, his reply saying, "My sister and I own up to the road edge and we don't want anyone backing up onto our yard." I waited for him to go into the house and shoveled up all the glass, not wanting to argue the point. The next I saw the sister and explained about the property line and my dad having to use that section of city-owned property to back up. She was belligerent, not believing the city owned the property in question. She insisted she owned that part of the road. Again, I cleaned up broken glass and called the police, who told them it was a danger to children and pets. About a week went by and as I came home from work I saw huge boulders lined up along the roadway, giving very little room to pass one car through the side of the street. There was no way 2 cars could pass each other. My dad and mom were out shopping while I waited for them to return. It was not long before my dad pulled into the small side road from the main road. He stopped beside me and said, "Who did that?" as if I didn't know. Now, my husband worked for the city and I made a call to the highway division where he was working. About an hour later, the highway crew boss was there and called the mayor's office to get approval to remove the 7 large boulders from the roadway. Within another hour, a bucket loader and dump truck was there removing the boulders and a police officer put a ticket on the door of the ones who had the boulders put there. They were charged with destruction of city property and causing a traffic hazard. 2 months later, they moved out. And by the way, guys, I just wanted to show you, while I'm recording my videos, someone is always with me and really enjoys being in here for some reason. I have no idea why. But basically, sometimes she likes to chill here on the carpet, on the couch, but then she scratches these and then she comes in here. Come on, Disney. Disney now. Yeah, so as you can see, she's doing well, and and the vet also said that her ears are much better, like they are not dirty anymore, so she basically recovered and the medicine worked, so she's doing really well. So thanks for all your nice comments about Disney. I think she's a worthy member of the Ripe Star community, and yeah, thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you again tomorrow. And Ripe Stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel, but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional Ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support and I hope to see you again tomorrow.